if I believe it was my fault, then I can do things differently so that it doesn't happen again. But by saying it wasn't my fault, wow, that's a vulnerability that for a very, very long time was way too uncomfortable for me. There is so much power in acknowledging that I was sexually assaulted. It's like I am standing up, maybe for the first time in my life, and saying, hey, I was sexually assaulted, and it wasn't my fault. And so the brilliance of survivors, and I believe this to my core, is our ability to protect ourselves, to escape from those thoughts, those feelings that perhaps we're not ready for yet, we just don't know what to do with. When you listen to that, when you really listen to the voice that said, okay, this doesn't feel right. I don't have to know why it doesn't feel right. I don't have to try to figure it out. I just follow that. I just follow that and leave.
I'm standing in a line of shame, just couldn't take the blame, hoping for a change, but everything's the same. It's still the same. I'm running out of things to say. I need it yesterday. Oh, still I fall again and again. Oh, can I afford to cry? I paid the price for every lie. And
Hello, I'm Lorward, and welcome to our monthly program devoted to education, healing, and personal triumphs as they relate to recovering from trauma caused by sexual abuse, presented by Voices Beyond Assault.
And I'm Craig. As most of us here today, Lorward and I are also survivors of sexual abuse. Voices Beyond Assault presents these programs because we understand that men and women who suffer sexual assault are not always heard. We want to amplify their voices, empower them to heal, and provide the resources that are necessary.
As such, we would like to first remind you that this program will contain discussions about emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, and may contain explicit language. While today's program puts a spotlight on the healing journey specific to men, sexual assault and abuse is prevalent among all human beings, and our programs are all inclusive.
Today, we have a conversation with Deborah Halvorson. Deborah is herself a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. She took her experiences in recovering from this experience and became a certified coactive coach, a certified trauma-informed coach, and an associate certified coach through the International Coaching Federation.
Deborah is also the founder of Through the Jungle, LLC, a life coaching business especially dedicated to helping all survivors of sexual abuse. She's coming today with us from Minnesota, hopefully on a lake somewhere.
Today's discussion will focus mainly on Deborah's amazing new book called Out of the Basement: Beyond Surviving Sexual Assault. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us today. I have to say, we were just fascinated by your book, which really focuses on the healing process for those who suffered sexual assault. There's so much to unpack here that I want to get right to it. So let's start with the very first line, which states, "I am a survivor of sexual assault. It was not my fault." Those words sound so logical to say, yet it's difficult for us to say them sometimes. Why do you think that is?
Well, thank you for having me here, both of you, and giving me an opportunity to discuss this. I think that those words are so difficult to say, at least they were for me, because first of all, I don't want to be a survivor of sexual assault. I really don't. And also, if I say it was not my fault, then whose was it? Whose was it? I mean, I was involved in this. I was the common denominator of all of this when I was growing up. And if it's not my fault, then I'm a victim. Don't want to be a victim. Victims are weak. They get hurt, all of that. But also, for me, there was that piece of, and this might sound kind of weird, but that piece of feeling like I had some control if I could say it wasn't my fault. I mean, if I believed it was my fault, okay, there's that little bit of control. And if I believe it was my fault, then I can do things differently so that it doesn't happen again. But by saying it wasn't my fault, wow, that's a vulnerability that for a very, very long time was way too uncomfortable for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are basically essentially saying I'm a vulnerable person and things can happen to me and some things are out of my control. It's like that's a very scary thing to admit to or say that is true.
Very much, yes.
Um, your book is more a story about healing and survival. It's really almost like a little bit of a manual and a how-to book for survivors. You divided it up into three parts. Can you share us a bit about why you did that and the importance of each of these parts, the be, the do, and the share?
Thanks for that question. Here's the thing about the be, do, and share piece. It came to me right away when I first started writing the book, and I thought, oh, that's dumb. And I kept pushing it over because I didn't know what it meant. And I thought that's just kind of hokey, but it would not leave me. It kept coming back. And the be, do, share. I thought, all right, okay, I give up. I will include this, but I have no idea how. And I had actually finished writing the book. And then the be, do, share came up again. And I was like, okay, now what am I supposed to do with this? And then I looked at all the parts of the book. And part one is being. This is how we can be as sexual assault survivors. This is how we can be. And part two was this is what we can do to support each other, to develop self-sustaining communities, to heal. And part three is the sharing the stories so that we know we're not alone and that there is healing out there for every single one of us. So does that answer your question? We do share?
Yes. We'll get into those a little bit more. In step one, you say to acknowledge we were sexually assaulted, that we have to acknowledge that we were sexually assaulted. And that kind of goes back to the first sentence in the book. But I mean, I want to say most of us are aware that this happened to us, or I was always aware, yes, something happened to me, but I buried it and didn't want to address it, especially if we were children when we were assaulted. So what does that acknowledgement mean, really, and why is it so important to our healing process?
Because it's reality. It's real. I spent so much time living in a pretend sort of make-believe reality. Yeah. I got sexually abused and sexually assaulted when I was in my 20s and all that. Yeah. That happened. Everybody's got a sad story, I used to say to myself. Everybody's got something. This happens to be mine. And there is so much power in acknowledging that I was sexually assaulted. It's like I am standing up, maybe for the first time in my life, and saying, hey, I was sexually assaulted, and it wasn't my fault. It's not my shame. It's not my shame. It's not for me to go and hide because I've been sexually assaulted. Now, I'm not going to stand up in a movie theater and say, hey, sexually assaulted. Okay. I'm not talking about that level. I'm talking about acknowledging it to myself because it's huge. The magnitude of a sexual assault is huge. And that's why it's important. Because look what happened. I've been sexually assaulted and I'm still standing.
You have to be able to articulate what problem you're trying to solve if you want to go about it. And part of that problem is saying, hey, this thing happened, and
Yes.
being honest about it, you know.
Yes.
That is a really difficult process for some people, and
Mm-hmm.
for some others it's not, but it depends for everybody. Let's transition a little bit more into the book. You do such a good job of using imagery to evoke an emotion, to evoke a space, to evoke a time. And you say, you use this imagery of how we are in a cold, dark, damp basement before we're healing, but we kind of like it there because it's become comfortable for us. And you walk past a flight of stairs, and at the top of the stairs is a door. And that door has just a little bit of that bright light shining through the bottom. Tell us a little bit about this imagery. Like, I feel like it's so appropriate and apt.
It sort of feels like that imagery is very powerful to me, and it feels like that's what happened to me. That's what happened. I am a survivor who had the uh, brilliance to block out and repress. Okay. And it wasn't like, I mean, many people do that. Okay. It's the brain taking over. There's scientific evidence for that. Okay. And so I feel like I lived in a basement for many years. And I just kept walking around and doing what I needed to do. And even when I first started to have my memories, I still kind of felt like I was living in that basement and just walking by them. And then something happened. And maybe it was the healing that I was doing from my recovery from alcoholism and drug addiction, my spirituality. Something shifted in me where all of a sudden, when I walked by those stairs, I saw something that I actually saw the stairs, first of all, like there was a way out. And I think that probably came with my acknowledgement that I was sexually assaulted. And see the stairs, and for a while, it's just the stairs that I'm seeing because I'm getting used to this idea, getting used to this, opening up my brain and kind of letting it sink in that I've been sexually assaulted, and sort of lifting the veil of denial of my whole childhood. And so I see the stairs, and then I see that hope at the top of the stairs. Because what is light if it's not hope, right? And so I see that light at the top of the stairs, and it's like, oh, okay. Maybe I don't have to live down here. Maybe I don't have to stay down here. Maybe there is something else. And so that imagery that you're talking about was the whole premise of the book. It's the metaphor that goes throughout the whole book because it's just so what I felt like.
And then you went up to the door and you weren't sure you could go back and retreat a little bit, and then finally you opened that door.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I have to say, it's just such a powerful image, and I know it's the name of the book and it's the picture on the front of the book, which is really amazing. And I had no idea when I picked up the book and started reading what I was going to expect. I thought it was going to be something, survivors held hostage in a basement, and in a way it was, right? And in a way it was. So I was quite surprised that I surprised myself. The way you write is so direct and powerful. It's so amazing because it's easy to read because you just tell people how it is. And when talking about truth, you say the moment we acknowledge the truth that we were sexually assaulted, we cannot unsay it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the biggest thing, right? You say the truth is that powerful that, but it's a bit scary, right? So I remember when I first actually said it out loud. it was scary. It was scary to say. And you say there's no going back. Why is that truth so powerful for us?
I think because it's been wanting to come out for so long. It's been down there, and we've been pushing it back, and it's been wanting to come forward, because how do I get complete? How do I fix this fracture, of and fix my wholeness? How do I do that? Well, I got to get everything forward. And I think the truth is, it's one of those it's one of those things in life that once you say it, once you actually open the door and just let it out, there's fear, most definitely fear, but there's also relief. Ooh, just this big sense of relief. And even if we choose to go back in the basement and spend some more time in the basement because maybe we're not ready for this yet, or we just can't figure out how we can do it, the truth stays with us. It stays with us. We can't unsay it. We can't unfeel it. We can't, you can't go back from it. And you may try to put it back in that little box where it was, but it doesn't fit anymore. I mean, it doesn't fit because it's come out and it's seen the light of day. And so that's people, I think, really struggle a lot when they try to put it back.
Yeah, putting it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. And when something is so true, it doesn't need to be defended or supported. It will grow itself without any need of assistance. And it's like, you can't put that, back into the box, like you said.
I love that. It'll grow itself. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially for something so true. Your book is for all survivors. You've seen a myriad of responses, but there's a thread that connects all of human experiences. We're talking about physical responses, we're talking about mental responses, we're talking about spiritual responses, which I found very interesting. This is especially true when we talk about like our body's attempts at survival, where through these escapist behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
Can you go over some of these like typical behaviors that survivors will respond to, either to escape, to blame themselves, or anything else that you talk about in your book?
Well, you guys can probably identify with this. I mean, when I get that feeling of anxiety that comes up, or if I'm triggered, and understand, I spent most of my life not understanding what a trigger was. Okay, I mean, I'm in the beginning triggered 24/7, and I have no idea why I'm reacting the way I am. And so the brilliance of survivors, and I believe this to my core, is our ability to protect ourselves, to escape from those thoughts, those feelings that perhaps we're not ready for yet, we just don't know what to do with. And I did a lot of drinking when I was growing up. I abused a lot of drugs, but I got sober and in a recovery program at a very young age. So then what did I do? Then, because I wasn't ready to deal with all this, then what did I do? I was a person who, it was extremely important to me to control everything in my environment because I never felt safe. And not feeling safe is one of the common residues that most of us suffer from. And people think, oh, you don't feel safe, you're afraid of the dark type thing. Well, yeah, I was. A lot of people don't feel safe, but they're not afraid of the dark. There's other things. It's that feeling of always waiting for the other shoe to drop. Okay, always knowing that, well, this is okay, but it's not going to last. That type of feeling. So what I did is that when I was no longer into the alcohol and the drugs, because it was totally getting me into too much trouble. And so when I wasn't doing that, I was trying to control everything around me. Everything around me. The people, the places, the situations. And if I can control my environment, you can't hurt me, and I'm not going to get hurt. And another way that I protected myself was I had a litany, I mean, a repertoire of negative self-talk that kept me very, very engaged in how I could never meet up to anybody's standards. I mean, I didn't even know what mine were, but I couldn't meet anybody else's standards. So I kept my mind busy by constantly talking in my head about, well, you'll never pass that test, or, well, why would he want to go out with you? Or, oh my God, I can't believe you said that. What is wrong with you? Or, you are fat, dumb, and ugly. That was a big one, fat, dumb, and ugly. And so people pick their own. And I'm sure you guys have your own that you have used. And I listed in the book some really common ones. Mm-hmm. You know, people sexually act out because they figure, well, this is all I'm good for. You know, I sexually act out. Cutting is a big one. But then you've got the subtle ones. People pleasing, trying to make everybody happy all the time, which is sort of which is along the same lines as controlling your environment. Because if I can make everybody happy, then you will all like me and nobody's going to hurt me. And so it's a way, and it's brilliant. I can't say it enough. It's a way that we survive. It's a way that we keep going and excel at our lives, is by escaping and developing these protections. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I remember before I had come to terms with what happened to me, I would go and travel. I travel a lot for my work, and I would go into hotel rooms, and the first thing I would do is open the closet really fast to make sure nobody's in there. If it had God forbid, it would have a shower curtain, I'd have to flip it open. And I thought it was just because I watched Psycho too much as a kid, but right. But you know, I found out later, well, why I was doing that, and I wasn't feeling safe, and so it really resonated a lot. And what I want to tell people that are listening to this program, this book is not for women, it's for all survivors, like Lorward said earlier. It's like not no matter what nationality or sexual orientation you are, or male or female, doesn't matter. This book, it talks to all of us. But one part that I found a little bit discerning was, I think of self-blame as this terrible thing. I used to blame myself for this all the time. But you actually say that self-blame is a survival response. How so? How is it a survival response?
Well, for me, it gave me if everything can be my fault, and I know I'm going all the way over to the other spectrum, but if I can be the person at fault here, then I can make sure it doesn't happen again. Then I really wasn't a victim. I just did something wrong that time. You know, maybe I didn't fight hard enough, or maybe, you know, whatever. But so if I can carve out a way within that whole situation where it can be my fault, then I get back a little bit of control. So I think a little bit of control, a little bit of power. And what I don't realize is that is just another level of self-harm, another way to continue hammering on myself for what happened, which wasn't my fault. Yeah. Good. I'm glad that makes sense.
It does.
There are so many things that people do to try and rationalize their experience, to try and help themselves survive. I think you touched on some self-blame, substance abuse, people pleasing, all these different things that we do. But at the end of many of your sections, you actually end with gratitude statements and new practices to kind of shift those paradigms. you tell us a bit about both of these and why they're important to the process?
Good question. Thank you. The gratitude statements are a way for me to inject into this at the end of every step into this process, just the word gratitude, that, you know what, we're still here. We're still here and we're still functioning, most of us at a very high level. We got to have some gratitude for that. And we got to have some gratitude for what we've just learned about ourselves in this chapter, right? What did we just learn? And let's have some gratitude for that. Because change doesn't happen without gratitude. Shifts do not happen without gratitude. And the new practice section of it is more the question of what can I start to do differently to incorporate this learning into my life. And the University of Pennsylvania has this whole master's PhD level course called Positive Psychology. Dr. Martin Seligman created it, and I took the course. I took the course that's offered online. I'm not master's level or anything like that, but I took the course. And one of the biggest things that positive psychology talks about is having a new practice, and shift it to positive. Because we're not getting all mamby-pamby, everything is wonderful here, right? We're just doing a couple of little things. We're going to have a gratitude statement, and we're going to shift our practice just a little bit to make it a little bit more manageable, and shift it in some of the ways that it talks about in the previous chapter.
That's interesting. And you know, a lot of the times I think we as survivors who are here forget that there are survivors who didn't make it, who didn't have that, can't have the gratitude for being here because they didn't survive it. It took them over. And I have a friend who it took him over, and he ended his life because of it. And we all do, I'm sure. So we have to keep that in mind. And I know in speaking with you and reading your book, writing this was a spiritual process for you. Can you explain a bit and then tell us how that led you to talk about a major focal point you feel is important for survivors, and that is our inherent spiritual connection?
Oh boy, that's a big one. Because I struggled the most with writing chapter 2, and that's the inherent spiritual connection piece. Because it's very difficult to put that in writing, to put it in words, because so much of it is a feeling. And so I'll just indulge me a little bit to give you a little bit of history about my spirituality. I grew up Catholic, nothing wrong with Catholicism, many things wrong with my family and their view of Catholicism. And so grew up with that. But when I got into a recovery community, after I had been arrested and had to go to rehab and all of that, and got into a recovery community, the foundation of that recovery community is a God of your understanding. You know, how do you understand God? And so it gives you a freedom. Gives you a freedom to figure out, who do I want my God to be? Who do I want this higher power, this being to be? And so before I wrote this book, I had 35 years of practicing and figuring out my spirituality. And I believe that every level that I got to in my spirituality brought me closer to opening that door, that closet in the basement, right? And so I was 10 years into this recovery program before I had my first memory. And I believe that was a divine intervention type thing, whatever you want to call it, because I had a spiritual foundation. I believed in a God of my understanding. could do for me what I couldn't do for myself. And I mean, got me out of my family. I mean, most survivors don't completely cut themselves off from their family. I had to go. And where did I get that strength? And where did I get that courage? And as I'm writing this book, in the years leading up to writing this book, I'm starting to become aware of the fact that there is this divinity that lives within me. I mean, Christians will call it the Holy Spirit, right? But a lot of Christians won't say the Holy Spirit lives within me. Some of them will. But we're all kind of talking the same language, but we're just picking different words that work for us. And so that divinity, that inherent spiritual connection, we're all born with it. We all have it. It's inside of all of us. It's that courage. It's that courage that brought you guys to Voices Beyond Assault. You know, it's that part of us that wants the best for ourselves and the best for others. We've all got it in us. There've been tons of books written about it. I mean, just hear the Dalai Lama talk once, you know, and it's in there, or Gandhi, or you know, whatever. And that's where that comes from. We save and we rescue ourselves. Nobody can do it for us. Nobody can do it for us. There are people out there who can guide us, okay, like therapists and coaches and counselors and good friends and all of that. They can guide us, but they can't do it for us. And so how do I do it? How do I do this? How do I face what happened? How do I move beyond it? I got to tap into that. I got to tap into that part of me that has been there from the very beginning. That part of me that is strong, is powerful, is full of great ideas, is, you know, creative. That part of me that we all have. But it's hard to find that. It's hard to find that when you got that chatter going on in your head, and when you're dragging behind you shame, self-blame, and never feeling safe. It's really hard to find it. And it becomes very uncomfortable to step out of what I have created to keep myself safe and go over here, or even just stick my leg over there and say, uh-oh, should I really try this? Am I going to be safe over here? What is this? But if you see it in other people enough, and that's where I get into in the book about listening to other survivors talk, you want what they have. You want that peace, whether they're talking about it or not. They've got it. And that's that light that we want to see in ourselves. So I don't know if that explained it. That just, you know, it's such an individual thing.
Yeah.
You talk about the spiritual connection, and at one point you ask this question where I think it's very pointy and telling, where you say, if we trust in something outside of ourselves that's so incredibly powerful and so divine, shouldn't have it just come in and saved us? And
Yeah.
can you tell us about what is your response to that?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I felt forsaken for so many years, because I had a religious background, and even when I started to develop my own spirituality, there was always that little bit of a wall, like, you know, oh, okay, I'm supposed to 100% believe in you, but where the hell were you when everything was happening to me? Because it didn't just happen once. It was a repeated lifestyle for me the entire time that I was growing up. And where the hell were you? What, if I'm supposed to believe that you're so strong and powerful, what in the world? You left me behind. You didn't take care of me. You didn't do what you were supposed to do. That was tough. I spent a lot of years there. a lot of years there. And you know, you can have both of those things going on at the same time. You can have this, I'm developing my spirituality and my spiritual connection, plus where the hell were you? Okay, so they went on at the same time for me for many, many years, until I got to the place where I could say, again, it's an evolution. It doesn't happen overnight. At least it didn't for me. Oh my God. It's an evolution to get to the place where I am, well, wait a minute. And I think I say this in the book, there's no magic wand. Nobody's going to pull out their magic wand and say, you know what, leave her alone, or you're all better now, or here, I will pull you out of this family and put you in a safe place. That just doesn't happen. Maybe it happens for maybe 1 in a million, but it just doesn't happen. So what happens then? What happens? I'm at that place of choice. I talk about choice a lot in the book. I'm at that place of choice. I can sit here with this spirituality, this spiritual connection that seems to work really well for me in all other areas of my life. And I can sit here where I am and resent the fact that I wasn't rescued and that I wasn't saved. I can do that. Or I can choose to look at it from a different perspective. Perhaps I was. Perhaps that's why I'm still standing here. It's because I was rescued and I was saved. I wasn't and am not one of those survivors who can't go there. And when I mean go there, I mean they can't go into their abuse and it fully heal. I'm not one of those. So maybe I was rescued. But who did that? Who did that? That's where that spiritual connection comes in. That's where the divinity inside comes in. I had and still have a power within me that I was born with. And that's that piece that rescued me. We rescue ourselves. We rescue ourselves because of our spiritual connection, because of the divinity within. And I bet you guys can look back on your recovery journeys and see where that sort of kicked in for you.
Most definitely. And I think that my spiritual connection actually saved me and helped me and the abuse. So I can definitely point to that. But it's something that a lot of people struggle with. They struggle about not just identifying the spiritual connection, but then trusting and surrendering to that spiritual connection. And that's something you talk about in the book too. Why is that important to get to the point where we trust and surrender to our spiritual connection?
Can I back up a little bit? Because you said something that shot something off in my head when you said that you believe your spiritual connection saved you during the abuse and all that. That I 100% agree with that. Those of us who dissociate during our abuse, what is that if it's not my internal divinity saving me and giving me the ability to check out? So yes, I wanted to touch on that. And what was your question?
So trusting and surrendering is very difficult. Then once you identify that you have a spiritual connection, how do we trust and surrender to that? And why is that important?
First of all, I struggled a lot with the word surrender. I didn't know for sure whether I should put it in there or not, but it just kept showing up. So I kept surrender in there. But the trust piece that's so important is because I'm not a truster. I don't trust people. I'm better at it. I'm way better at it than I was, but I don't trust people because it's been my experience that sooner or later, you're going to hurt me. Whether it's through disappointment, betrayal, physical, sexual, whatever, sooner or later, you're going to hurt me. So I am asking people to trust. And I know what the journey was for me. And it is a journey to trust. But until I was able to trust that this divinity, this spiritual connection only wants what's best for me and also talks to me all the time. And I don't mean that weird. I mean, it's that voice that we all hear that says, Craig, come on, you can do this. You know you can. And it's just that negative voice that we're so used to that's so much louder. But it's trusting that one voice of encouragement, because that's that divinity inside. And the surrender piece, I got to quit fighting. I got to quit fighting. I got to quit thinking that I know how to do this, because I don't. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do what the survivors that I'm hearing share their stories have done. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I do now, but way back, I didn't know. And so that's the giving up control. When you surrender, you give up control. So they have to happen at the same time. Oh, I hate to use that term, have to. For me, they happen at the same time. If I can trust this creator, this spiritual connection, this divinity within, if I can trust that, then it's going to be that much easier for me to surrender and give up the control and to just let it happen and believe that I'm not going to get hurt again like that. I'm not. I'm going to know if I keep those lines open and listen to that voice. It's going to say, this is not a safe place for you to be. We've all felt it. You walk into a room and you get that feeling. You get that feeling. And most of the time, because we're so used to it, we power through that feeling. Oh, go away. Everything's fine. Come on, whatever. And who knows what happens. But when you listen to that, when you really listen to the voice that said, okay, this doesn't feel right. I don't have to know why it doesn't feel right. I don't have to try to figure it out. I just follow that. I just follow that and leave. That's just one example. But it's
a good example.
All the time. Yeah. Yeah. Did that answer that? Trust and surrender?
Yeah, it did. Yep.
I babble a lot, so interrupt me.
No, not at all. It's quite compelling.
That's why we have you on. We are looking for a little bit of the babble.
Well, you're going to get it.
In your book, at one point, you kind of touched on this earlier. You talk about negative and limiting self-beliefs.
Yeah.
You give us a list of some of the things. You shared a couple of your own personal ones that are particularly difficult for you. And then you say we actually don't acknowledge these to ourselves. Can you give us an example? And if we don't acknowledge themselves to ourselves, how can we avoid or treat them?
We don't acknowledge them to ourselves because we're too smart. If we said to ourselves, I am such a flippin' loser, okay, we would know, oh my God, okay, that's not a good thing to say. That's not a good thing to say. That's not a good way to feel about ourselves, I might have to do something about that. If I feel like I'm a flippin' loser, I might have to take a look at that and do something about it. So we find other ways, other more subtle ways to have that same negative and limiting belief show up. Maybe we sabotage ourselves. And maybe we say, well, I'm just not a good enough golfer. I played golf a lot when I was younger. I'm just not a good enough golfer. I probably won't succeed in this tournament because I'm just not good enough. Or I'm just not very good at math. Yeah, I'm good at other things, but I'm just not very good at math, or I don't do relationships well, or, just a variety of different ways to say that we're a loser without saying that we're a loser. And that's just one example, because I think we're too smart. We're brilliant beings. I mean, we're too smart, and that's not just survivors. That's most of society out there that not acknowledging what they're really saying to themselves. Did that answer that?
Yeah, it's a so one of my favorite concepts in your book is living in today. And you say that, and I always say you say because when you read your book, actually, it's like you're talking to the reader, just like you're talking to us right now. And that's your writing style, and I think it's amazing. And I was a journalism major, so I recognize when people are really you know great writers.
Thank you.
But
Thank you.
you say anxiety, worry, and obsession. The three like most common things I think that us survivors all go through, all of those. But they cannot survive in the present moment when we live in today. Can you explain that? Because wow, I'd love to get rid of those.
And it's a practice, but anxiety, worry, what was the other one?
And obsession.
Obsession. Wrote the book, can't remember what's in it.
No, but I have
Anxiety,
obsession, obsessed, I'm obsessed. Yeah.
anxiety, worry, and obsession. Um, all three of those, if you really think about it, either put us in the past or put us in the future. Okay? So even if we're anxious about a meeting we have in 15 minutes, that's still moving us out of the moment and into the future. Or having some being obsessed with the fact that you said something stupid at a party and it just keeps looping around in your head. Well, you've just stepped back into the party. And so the staying in today has been so vital for me because it's a practice. And none of this stuff I thought up on my own. Okay. It's all different things that people have taught me over the years. But if I am really anxious about this podcast, if I'm really anxious about showing up for this podcast and I'm worried about it and I'm, oh my God, what am I going to embarrass myself? What am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. What I have learned is to stop, to pause, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Okay, my feet are on the floor. I'm in this chair. I'm in this room. I am safe. Nobody's here to hurt me. Okay. Let's move. Or let's just stay here until the 15 minutes is up and I go on Zoom. It's a staying in today, staying in the moment. And simply just saying, I am okay right now. Right now, I am okay. Because so much of my life was about protecting myself from the next thing that could happen. Protecting myself from the possibility of harm, which was a really great thing to protect myself from when I was growing up, because that was my reality. That's not what's happening in my life right now. It's not. I don't need to be protected. That doesn't mean that I'll never feel anxiety. I will. I feel it quite often. I recognize it for what it is and do that little, okay, let's just, hey, and acknowledge that I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling anxious, or I'm getting obsessive, or this, that, or the other thing. The most difficult part for me with worry and obsession is feeling safe at night. And so many years. I mean, it's like what you talked about with going into the hotel. Mm-hmm. You check your safety first. I mean, that's the first thing you do. And I had a lot of difficulty staying home alone. Didn't matter if it was during the day, at night, whatever. And so it's been in like the last 5 years that, I've been working on this since like 87. So it's been the last 5 years that I have been able to work with that today thing and just really stop and say, okay, I'm here alone. I'm safe. And sometimes it's a fight. Sometimes it's an absolute fight. Well, how do you know you're safe? How do you know somebody isn't hiding in the basement? How do you know? How do you know? How do you know? You know, and so that staying in today is extremely important.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you talk about this and you say, even though anxiety will pull you to either say this future thing will happen and it'll be terrible, or you reminisce on something that happened in the past and you're like, I'm so dumb for doing that.
Right.
But instead of like addressing those directly, your response is today and the now. There's almost like a, I don't say you ignore them, but you almost redirect the focus, which I think is
I
a very,
like that
very,
word redirect. I like that because that's kind of what it feels like. But think about what happens when you engage the anxiety. When you engage the anxiety and the fear, you don't ever win that argument. You don't.
it grows stronger the next time.
Exactly. You just continue the loop. You continue that loop of, well, maybe somebody is in my basement. Maybe I'm not safe here. Maybe, you know, somebody does have access to my hotel room. Maybe. You know, that's you engage it, and I think you feed it, and it gets bigger. And it's not ignoring it, because what I'm doing is acknowledging that I'm afraid, or acknowledging that I have anxiety, or acknowledging that I'm being a little obsessive here. So I'm acknowledging it. I'm not ignoring it at all. But like you said, I'm redirecting it. I love that.
And you're not allowing it to dictate your actions.
There you go.
You say, I see that thing and it could happen. It could be a thing. But what I'm going to do right now in this moment is right here, right now, which I think is a very powerful thing to say. Kind of in a similar vein, negative self-talk, right?
Yeah.
We all suffer from it. We all do it. You actually say something that I find very interesting is you say you need to identify the body sensation that goes along with it. Why is tying those things together important to you? And could you give us a few examples?
Because our bodies will tell us what's going on. As a sexual assault survivor, I ignored my body for a very long time, other than when I was hating it, which was quite often. But I ignored it. I'd get a headache, I'd get a stomach ache, I'd get a big old cold sore, I'd get all kinds of things from my body, but would not pay attention to it at all. And so I believe, and it's also part of my trauma-informed coaching, that our bodies are always giving us a positive message, a positive intention. Okay, so if I'm into some deep negative self-talk, oh my God, why did you say yes to this podcast? Why are you doing this? Oh my gosh, you don't have anything to share, blah, 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 blah. If I'm in the depths of that, what's happening with my body, my stomach, for me, my stomach is starting to hurt. I'm starting to get kind of a tightness across here. And so if I allow myself to feel that, then I know that I'm in the midst of some pretty serious negative self-talk. What's going on? What's going on? My stomach hurts. And this is very difficult to do. It's a practice. It is a practice, because you have to pause from all of that old protective thinking and try something different. You have to pause. And that's scary, because it doesn't feel safe. It doesn't feel safe to pause and to say, okay, my stomach is hurting right now, or my neck is just really, really tight right now. What's the positive intention that my body has? Oh, okay, I'm kind of trashing myself again. All right, that's usually what happens when my neck starts to hurt. I am trying to sabotage myself, make sure that I don't step out of this protective zone that I'm in. And so that connection is so, so important. I mean, there's an entire book written on it. The Body Keeps the Score. I mean, it's one of the best books ever written, with connecting trauma to the body. And so I hate it when I say we have to. It's really important. It's really important to make that connection. another thing too is that trauma lives in our body. It stays there until we give it permission to leave. Because the brain and the body don't know when we're triggered that it's not happening again. They don't know that. And so they kick in and they do what they normally do until we simply say, thank you, but we don't have to do that anymore. This is not happening right now. And so that's the huge connection between the brain and the body and the negative self-talk and how it harms us. I mean, it physically harms us.
So you talk about identifying it and being aware of it, but then you say conquering it. Conquering negative self-talk takes practice. How do we go about practicing conquering negative self-talk?
You just acknowledge that it's happening. That's the biggest thing. That's the most powerful thing we can do. Just, okay, that's negative self-talk. I mean, and you think about, because negative self-talk is just another way to harm ourselves. Because what is negative self-talk if it's not harmful? It's harmful to our psyche. It's harmful to our being. It's very harmful to our spirit. And it blocks us. It blocks us from that trust and surrender that is so important with that spiritual connection. And so you acknowledge it. Okay, that's my negative self-talk. And sometimes that's all you have to do, Craig. Just acknowledge it. Okay, yep, that's my negative self-talk again. Boom. And maybe you keep going with it. But something happens when you acknowledge it. It's just like when we acknowledge we were sexually assaulted. Something happens. There's just like this little power burst that happens inside of us because we have acknowledged something that has for so long had power over us. And so you acknowledge it. It's like, okay, that's what you are. I got it. I'm on to you. You know, that kind of thing. You just keep acknowledging it.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you something. You've said this twice, and I find this very, very interesting. You say you hate when you say I have to. Why is that? I'm so curious.
That's a good listener that you are. Because there's not a right or a wrong way to do this healing. And when I say have to or must, that kind of thing, I feel like I'm telling people that this is the only way to do this. You have to do this or you're not going to get better. That's not true. That is not true. Everybody, if you have decided that you want to heal and you understand that that's something that you have to do, yes, that it's something that you need to do to continue to move forward with your life and broaden it, then you get to figure out how to do it. And that's the thing with this book. This is not a be all to the end all for everyone. It's suggestions. It's how many people I know have healed. Bless you. And so that's why I don't like to say have to. Because I don't want people to think that I'm the expert on their healing. I'm the expert on mine.
You're not telling people you have to use this tool this way because I said so, but you're saying
exactly
these are tools that exist and are available for you.
Yes.
You are the expert of your situation, or you and your therapist, or you and whoever you're working with. Right. And it is up to you to decide which tools you will pick and how you will apply them. You can advise them and you can say, this has worked for me. But ultimately, I see where you're coming from, and that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Thank you for clarifying.
That's why I don't like, but and I think I even say in the note to the reader that this is a tool in addition to what you're already doing. Because I'm assuming if people are picking up this book, that they're already doing something. You know, doesn't matter what. Maybe they're doing yoga, yoga every day to calm their body. I mean, whatever. This book is in addition to that, but it's not the be all to the end all, because it's not going to be the answer for everyone.
You talk about the need to speak with other trusted sexual assault survivors. I don't know that they're always easy to find. We can find them through organizations like Voices Beyond Assault, though, and that's how Lorward and I came together in the first place.
Oh, that's great.
But what can we get as survivors? What do we get from doing that?
Um, oh, you get so much. You get this feeling that you're not alone, that you're not the only one that this happened to. But even more than that, you get that camaraderie. There's that thread that now connects you to, like me connecting with you, Craig, or you, Lorward. We're like there's that thread that connects us now. We have an understanding based upon our trauma that these horrible things happen to us, but also we're still standing. How is it that you're still standing? What did you do? Or how is it that you're still standing? What did you have to do? And we share that strength, because it's not about the horrible things that happen to us. It's about, what do we do to live with them? How do we get full lives, even though this horrible stuff happened to us? Does that make sense?
Yes.
I always liken it to, there's a very shared sense of camaraderie for people who are in the military. And it's kind of like you all have this very similar experience. You went through it differently, you responded differently, but you have a certain sense of shared unity in either goal, in either destination, and that always ties you together. And it almost
Exactly.
sometimes helps you recognize each other as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even if we get together in a room with a bunch of survivors of sexual assault, we're not sitting around talking about our assault. There's a thread, there's a commonality, energy, if you will, that brings everyone together, and there's a sense of, oh my God, these people get it.
Yep.
These people get it.
We're all in on the joke. We all are part of some secret club. Like there's
Yes.
something there. Yeah.
Yes.
When you write about making peace, you say responding is an intentional thought, reacting is without thought. How can we use this in our process? Because I feel like I'm very reactionary and I want to be more of a responder.
Well, the best thing that helped me was when somebody said to me, reactions are based upon past experiences. I mean, we react to certain things in the same way that we always have. That's a reaction. That's familiar. That's familiar. And so I'm trying to think of a reaction. Oh, okay. Let's do this one, for example. This is a common one. I to this day, when my husband is the last one to come up to bed, I will get up and go down and make sure that he shut the garage door, that he turned on the nightlight, and that the outside light is on. I will make sure that that is a reaction to the one time he forgot. Okay. And so that is a reaction to that. Okay. A response would be taking a breath and saying, why don't I just ask him? Why don't I just ask him if he did this? And so I will ask him, did you turn on the nightlight? Did you shut the garage door? Did you turn on the outside light? And he will say, yes, I did all of that. And I don't need to get up and check. Truth be told, sometimes I still do. Okay. but that's my issue, not his. But and maybe that's not a good example, but you understand what I'm saying. The reaction is from something from my past. I've learned how to react when this happens, or when I feel this way. I've learned how to react. And a response is just doing that little pause. Okay. All right. And asking a few questions. Get curious about it. And it sounds like it might take a long time. It happens in a couple of seconds, where you just pause. Am I safe? Yeah.
I want to talk about, yeah, it does. Thank you. I want to talk about step 4. You talk about the effects of sexual assault on relationships. And I probably have never met a survivor who hasn't had difficulties with relationships. You say we have to understand how the residue, and I love that word, the residue of sexual assault keeps us from having fulfilling relationships and might even keep us in unfulfilling relationships, because I've known a lot of survivors that stay in terrible relationships as well, where they're even beaten or other things, and they stay in there. Can you tell us how we become aware of the difference between becoming part, or the difference in how we become a part of fulfilling long-term relationships? Because that's what we all want.
It is. And it starts with yourself. That's why in that chapter I said, before you get into the relationships that you're in and asking the questions about your relationships, you need to ask them for yourself. Or it's suggested that you start with yourself first. Because if I'm feeling good about who I am, if I'm trusting myself, if I'm trusting my spiritual connection, if I think I can rely on myself, then I'm grounded. I'm solid. I'm solid. And I'm going to be able to look at the relationships that I'm in a completely different light. If I'm looking at the relationships that I am in based upon my past and how I've protected myself and how I need to control everything. Let's just use that as an example. How I need to control my entire environment and everything that's in it. Who am I going to surround myself with? I'm going to surround myself with people who don't challenge me most of the time, or if I do get challenged, they're going to be dead to me. I'm going to surround myself with people who fit into that protective person that I am. And so if I'm still operating like that, then those are the people that I'm going to attract. And those are the people that are going to be attractive to me. If I think that I am so unworthy of love that I need to be treated like crap, those are the people that I'm going to attract. I'm going to attract people like that. So it's extremely important that I get right with myself in the best way possible before I can have really healthy relationships with others who honor me and who honor my healing process. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
You also write about the gift of choice, that there is power for us when we realize that we can and cannot change. Why is this important, and how do we get there?
I don't remember writing that. I'm sure I did.
And just to jog your memory a little bit, this is the part where you bring in the quote from Nelson Mandela, where you say, "May your choices reflect your hopes, never your fears," which is just so good.
Yeah. And so tell me, ask your question again.
Yeah. You write about the gift of choice.
Yeah.
That there is a power there for us when we realize what we can and cannot change. Why is this important for us, and how do we get there?
Okay. What's really important about that is the age-old statement that we can only change ourselves. We can't change anyone else. I mean, many, many books written about that. And realizing that if I am in, for example, a bad relationship, if I am in a bad relationship, no matter how hard I try, I'm not going to change that person. I'm just not. They are who they are, right? All I can do is change myself, and maybe ask a few questions. Why do I think I need to stay in a relationship where somebody treats me less than? What is it that's going on with me that's causing me to think that this is what I deserve? Tough questions to ask, especially when you're in the midst of it, but vitally, vitally important. I can't change that person. I can change myself. And once I get an idea, and what we're going for here, really, what we're going for here, bottom line, is learning how to love ourselves in spite of everything that we've been told about ourselves, everything that we've been led to believe, everything our negative self-talk is chattering at us about. It's a process of learning how to love ourselves. Because if I love myself, I'm not gonna be in a relationship with somebody who treats me less than. It's not gonna fit. It's not gonna fit. It's not gonna work. And so understanding that I can choose that is very, I mean, it's extremely important. And again, it's an evolution. We don't just wake up one day and say, I'm going to choose better relationships. Well, okay, how do you do that? You do that, first of all, by understanding what's going on with you. What's going on with me? Am I minimizing? Am I minimizing the seriousness of what happened to me? Am I pretending it didn't happen? Am I pretending that my life is something that it's not? It's very difficult to make a choice if I'm operating from that. But the bottom line, and it's another thread that runs through the whole book, is that we do get to choose. Sexual assault takes any choice away from us. I had no choice when I was growing up in anything that I was forced to do or anything that happened to me. No choice at all. And in fact, because I grew up with this whole mindset of no choice and everything is done to me, those are the relationships that I had. And they were not healthy. They did not honor me. And in fact, it took me many, many years to be in relationships where I felt seen, heard, and actually loved. And so it's a choice. And you said, how do we get to that point? It's that acknowledging. It's that acknowledging piece. Something in this relationship doesn't quite feel right. What's going on here? It's that acknowledging, which is so important that we have community that we can talk to people about. But we'll get to that.
And yeah, we will. And one of the other concepts I really love in your book is you talk about the healing process, the steps in removing a link. Okay, I removed that link. Oh my gosh, that was so powerful. Can you explain to people the concept of removing the links?
Yeah, it's when we start to realize that we're doing something different. It's when we start to behave differently in a way that serves us. And I don't mean that in a selfish way, in a way that serves us on our healing journey. That's how we break the links. It's when we step out of that protective comfort zone and do something different. Maybe we have gratitude for something that we thought was a horrible thing, right? Maybe we have achieved a level of gratitude. I understand why that happened to me now, or why that person, did what they did, whatever. Okay. That's an acknowledgement, and that's an understanding that we are not the horrible people that we tell ourselves we are. And boy, when we do that, that's about 3 or 4 links right there that get broken in the chain. But it's when we can turn around and say, oh my gosh, I'm not that scared person anymore, or I'm not that person who thinks bad things are going to happen to her all the time. It's that it's the awareness. It's the awareness that things are shifting and changing. That's when those links start to go away.
It's a great visual.
Yeah. How about that quote from that song of the Eagles? Oh my gosh. I'm talking about big links, and then that quote comes up, and I'm like,
yeah. And they're my favorite band. And,
me too. I love them.
Lorward may not. You know the Eagles, Lorward?
I know the Eagles. I don't know if I can name 5 songs from them.
That's okay. Okay. You know who they are. That's important.
Yeah, that's important.
Yeah. You also say healing takes practice. And I think that may be something that has been express an idea, but you put it so succinctly in words. And you use another great analogy about how a protective reaction is like us driving a truck over and over the same set of tracks. And we need to make new tracks if we are to move our healing process forward. Can you just expand on that a little bit more for us? Because I think that's a great illustration.
Well, yeah, and when you think about it, you guys are from California. In Minnesota, when it snows and before the plows come through, you're driving on everybody else's tracks because it's easier and you're not going to get stuck, right? But if it takes the plows a long time to come through, those tracks become very deep and very hard. And so when you try to move over, your car is kind of jiggling and it doesn't want to be over there. So that's the visual, and the there is such comfort in doing something familiar, isn't there? Even if it's harmful, even if it's not advancing our life, there's such comfort in it. We know how to function in it. I know how to function when I drive on those tracks over and over and over again. Most of the time, it doesn't feel very good to drive on those tracks, but so what? I know how to function in that. You start to move that over a little bit, and it's extremely uncomfortable. And that's what it felt like to me when I first started practicing living my life from a healing perspective rather than from a just surviving. And I feel a little uncomfortable putting the word just in front of that because I don't want to minimize how important it is to survive. But it's moving it over to this healing perspective. And that takes practice because it is unfamiliar. And how do we practice that? How do we practice that every day? It's that acknowledgement piece. It's that acknowledging when I'm feeling anxious, afraid, staying in today, looking at what and who I'm surrounding myself with. And it's a practice of trusting that spiritual connection, that divinity within that will tell us if we're not safe, that will tell us, maybe you better think about something else here. I mean, it's trusting that. And that's the practice. That's the practice. And it doesn't happen through osmosis or just sitting around and waiting for it to happen. It's deliberate. And for many people, it's just having that 30 minutes of silence every day where you just, and less people do it in the morning. I do it in the morning where I just sit. And I can meditate, sometimes I'll meditate and that means it'll be longer, but I'll just sit for 30 minutes and I won't listen to music. I won't listen to a podcast. I won't read. I'll just sit and trust. So it's just it's a practice. And I'm not sure many people are aware of how difficult it is to sit for 30 minutes.
I don't think I could do it.
And do nothing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
And do nothing. And I have even part of it, but you find your own practice, right? That's mine. You find your own, but it's a practice where you're doing something different. One of the things that I have struggled with a lot in my life is always having to have the TV on. No matter if I'm cooking, if I'm doing laundry, whatever I'm doing, the TV has to be on. And it's really helpful if it's a show that I'm very familiar with and I like because I don't have to pay attention. But the thing that does for me is that I do not have to think. I do not have to think, and I do not have to be aware of anything that's going on. It's an avoidance. It's an avoidance tactic for me. And it's one that I'm very skilled at. I'll just put the TV on. But it's been in the last couple of weeks, this is so interesting, the last couple of weeks where I've started to notice that it's moving over into the obsessive realm where it's very difficult for me to not have the TV on even when I'm sorting my laundry, okay? Folding big baskets of clothes, yeah, that makes sense. But sorting my laundry, for God's sakes. So it's noticing the ways that we are trying to not have to be with ourselves. And if I can carve out time to be with myself, just quiet, then I can hear. Then I can hear what's happening. I can hear the ideas that come up. If I've got that TV on in the background, I can't hear anything but Rachel talking to Ross. You know, I mean, it's that's what you hear.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
so now we know what you watch. Even Lorward knows who you watch.
Even I know.
So
Yeah.
let's talk about sharing one story. You talk about the importance of sharing our stories, but you also caution us survivors not to dwell too much on the sexual assault portions, which is really interesting because I remember when I first started sharing my story, I went into such excruciating detail and it was so painful. Can you tell us why it's a good idea not to dwell too much in the sexual assault itself when telling our stories?
Thanks for this, because there's a fine line. Because I'm definitely not saying don't ever talk about the details. For God's sakes, we have to talk about the details. But what I mean when I'm talking about that is if you are sharing a story, sharing your story to a group of people or on a one-on-one type thing, or in a podcast like this, right? People don't need to know who did what to me. Okay? I mean, the details, how it was done, anything like that. That is not a necessary piece of sharing. What that does for me is that it makes my heart race when I start sharing details like that. I get body reactions and they're trauma reactions. My heart races, and then I think, oh, I'm sharing too much. They're not going to believe me. And so this whole litany of stuff begins when it's like, okay, that's not the importance of sharing. The importance of sharing is for people to know that I am a sexual assault survivor. And it doesn't matter if it happened once, if it happened 90 times, it doesn't matter. I'm a sexual assault survivor, and bad things happen to me just like they did to you too. Okay? So now what? Now what? How do I keep getting out of bed every morning? How do I keep showing up to my job? How do I figure out how to have a life? You know, that's what's important. That's what's important. And I think a lot of times our society, because we live in a rape culture, I believe that a lot of the emphasis is on the details of the story. It's almost as if we have to allow people to make sense of why we're struggling so much. And my story is one where people would say, oh, yeah, wow, that's a tough story. I can see why you've had difficulty all your life. But you take another one of the stories in my book by a person who was assaulted by a cousin a couple of times. And the question that the conventional wisdom of society right now would be, well, what are you struggling for? That wasn't even penetration. That wasn't even rape. What's your problem? You know, and so the details of the assault distract us from what's really important. And what's really important is, how do you keep getting out of bed in the morning? That's what I want to know from a survivor. I don't want to know your details. I want to know, how do you keep doing this? How did you have the brilliance to start this podcast with everything that happened to both of you? How did you do that? That's what I want. I want that. I already got the other part, okay? So I don't really need the details of that.
I think we are all relatively familiar with some sort of tragedy in our lives. And living through that isn't, again, there are specific times, spaces, and occasions for that. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Um, but what we are more interested in, like what Craig and I shared about starting this podcast, which you're sharing about as well, is we want to learn about the thriving that is measured by inner strength, the resilience, the self-love, how people can get there. Like that's
Yes.
truly what we want to know. And like in the cheesiest like DreamWorks way, right? It's like it's not
Yes.
about who you are or what you started with, it's about where you're going and where you're trying to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, that being said, you talk about this resilience, this self-love. Do you think, and this might be a little reductionistic, like, do you think we can all get there? Do you think that's possible?
Um, I'm not sure I can answer that. I'm really not. Because I know, because if I answer that question, yes, then those individuals who can't do it, well, then that begs the question, what's wrong with them? Right? I think that everybody is made up in the way they're made up. You know, I look at my situation and my story, and I know people who have similar stories to mine, and some of them aren't doing very well. I mean, they are mentally and physically not doing very well at all, and it's not for lack of trying, you know. And
Mhm.
so I think that if I were to answer that question, yes, then there's a level of shame that gets attached to it for those individuals who just for whatever reason can't get there. And I don't think we're all meant to get there either. I think that as individual survivors of sexual assault, we have to find out where is this journey going to take us. Um,
Yeah,
and
I think
so,
that's very well said.
thank
That's a great answer. Love
you.
that answer because it's so the healing journey is so specific to each one of us.
Right,
And as long as we're breaking a link here and there, we're making progress, even if we're not, even if we're stuck in the basement,
right.
we're still, we still have hope. We still have to have hope, and we still need that hope to get further. And are we going to be at the great nirvana? Who knows?
Well, and where does compassion come in? If I expect everybody to be on the same journey that I am, where does the compassion come in for those who aren't? For those who it's just too difficult to climb those stairs. Does that mean they're less than? No. I got to have compassion for all of that. That's our humanity. That is our humanity. We love them where they are. And whatever step or still in the basement or just standing at the top of the stairs, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's that compassion piece that I 100% believe needs to get extended to every survivor out there. With wherever you are is okay. It's okay.
Yeah, the best
So,
we can do, sorry, Greg,
okay.
but the best we can do is love them for where they are, encourage
Yeah.
them, and try to be a good example of like this is what things could be, and maybe even beyond ourselves, be like, there's so much more that you could be, and trying
Yeah.
to balance those two of you're a person who's struggling with things, and you're also a person with the capacity to change and enact great change.
Mm-hmm. Well, and that's why the community that's you're probably getting to this, but that's why part two, the doing of the book, is so important. It's because it's an opportunity for people to come together and talk about their healing and what do they do. Like somebody could show up and say, "I couldn't get out of bed yesterday. I was just too depressed, or I just kept thinking about it, or whatever." And people will show up at that group and they'll say, "You know what? I know exactly what that feels like. I couldn't get out of bed 3 weeks ago. You I get that. I know what that feels like. But let's dive in and see if we can talk about how do we heal from that. I mean, that's what's so important.
Yeah, and I love that in your book and about how you talk about the importance of getting survivors together, and you give guidelines on how to set up these groups, and you give even guidelines of how to conduct the group meetings and discussions, and it's just fantastic, and I'm going to use it. I'm just telling you, I hope you don't mind me stealing
No,
it.
that's why it's in there. Steal away.
I'm definitely going to pursue that. So it's really amazing. What struck me in your book is that usually I've read a lot of survivor books, and because we've done this now for over a year, and it's you put the sharing of the stories. You have survivors share their stories. You put it at the end of the book, which is always at the beginning. It's always the first thing it smacks you is the survivor story. You consciously put it at the end of this book. Why did you do that?
Oh my gosh, it's so funny because I wasn't even going to include them. I was not even going to include survivor stories at all because I thought there's a lot of memoirs out there. There's a lot of survivor stories out there already. I don't want it to take away from everything else in the book. But I had the, again, like with the Be Do Share and some of the other things in the process of writing the book, it would not go away. It would not go away. And so I was like, okay, fine. We'll include the stories. They're going to be at the end. And why did I put them at the end? I had to think about that because I was adamant that if I'm going to include these stories, they're going to be at the end. There's several reasons for it. First of all, if I included the stories in the beginning, it is human nature to stop there and not go on any further. Because I get in a place when I read somebody's memoir or I read their story, and sometimes it's too much. It's too much for me, and I don't want to read anymore, or I stop in the middle of the book. And so it was also some of my own personal experience with reading people's stories and the difficulty that's there. Because when I read a person's story, particularly in a memoir, I know what they're feeling because I've experienced it. I know what they're feeling, and it's difficult to feel those feelings again. And so I thought if I put the stories in the beginning, then it would detract people from moving forward. And I decided to put the stories in, period. It's because, like I said, I couldn't escape that. But also, another reason that I decided to put the stories in is because I talk so much in this book about consult another trusted survivor. You know, check out this person. When this person said this, I was like, oh my gosh, that resonated with me. And so I thought, if I'm talking so much about that, I need to have that community in the back, the community that I'm talking about. And so I asked 6 people. Every single one of them said yes without hesitation. Well, only one of them said, what's the deadline? But the rest of them were, when the rest of them, absolutely. And I asked them to keep it to 2,000, 2,200 words. And I did give specific instructions about go light on the details. I think there's only one story in there that's a little bit heavier on the details than the others, but it's important to have it all wrapped together. There's the healing, there's the building community, and there's the sharing. This sharing piece is so that as survivors, we can understand that there's hope. There's hope. And most of the stories involve the hope and the healing because they didn't have many words to spend elsewhere. You know, I don't know if you guys have ever been to an open meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous where somebody gets up and they tell their story, right? There are people who will tell their story and give you 45 minutes of what it was like for them to be drunk. And then maybe 15 minutes of, oh gosh, I'm healing now, I'm better, blah, 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 right? Well, that first 45 minutes, I'm sitting in the crowd going, yeah, I know. I know. I know what it's like to be drunk. I know we do stupid shit. I know we hurt people. I know. Get me to the part. Get me to the part that's going to help me. And so that's, and that's just an example. Most people who tell their story in open meetings, you know, give the healing journey of it in Alcoholics Anonymous. But that's what I wanted for this. I thought we all know, because we're all sexual assault survivors. We know what it's like. And so tell me how you're getting out of bed. That's what I really want to know. How are you functioning? What are you doing to get better? That's what I need to know. And so I had one person tell me that the last story, I think it's called Common Denominator, should have come first in the book. And I gave him the same answer that I just gave you guys. No, we got to know, you got to know that there's hope and that there's healing before you just read somebody's story. Because reading their story, that's somebody else's journey. Sure, there's a lot of crossover with your own. Yeah. Of course, we can identify, but it's somebody else's journey. And what's your journey going to be? And that's what the beginning of the book is about.
The first story, actually, in the book, The Cycle Stops Now, is your own story.
Yes.
Would you like to take a little bit of this time to share a little bit about your story, a little bit about what you went through?
Yeah. How do I do this? Let's see. It's I mean, I'm the reason I'm saying how do I do this? I'm thinking, how do I do this without just saying what's in the story? But it doesn't matter, does it? I was born into a very extremely dysfunctional family. I can look back on it now and see that my parents were born into extremely dysfunctional families, and I'm sure their parents before them were. I mean, it just keeps repeating over and over again until somebody stops it. That's the family that I was born into. And I also grew up in a very small town in a community that was a psychosphere of dysfunction. So if you can imagine a dome of dysfunction being over this town, and the town had about 4,000 people in it, a dome being over this town, and it's a dome of dysfunction, it was everywhere. I don't know what was going on behind closed doors in other people's homes, but I know what was happening in the schools and in the churches, and it was a very cultish town where there were occasionally ceremonies, ritual ceremonies, where abuse would happen, and so that's the kind of that's what I was born into. I was born into this madness, and I one of the things that I write about in my story is that as a child born into that, you don't know it's madness. You don't, your reference point is that. And so you don't know how crazy it is. You're just trying to survive, and you're just trying to figure out with the child's brain, what do I have to do next to get my dad to like me? What do I have to do next to have my mom quit hitting me? What do I have to do next? And so you're just going from one thing to the next, trying to survive. But at the same time, you're a kid, and kids really have a lot of fun. I mean, no matter where they come from, they really try to have a lot of fun, because that's what being a kid is. And so, you know, I was with my three sisters, a family of 5 kids. My 4 of us were 1 year apart. We were all girls. And then my brother came 6 years after my youngest sister. And so we hung out together. We did a lot of stuff. We did a lot of stuff together. Never, ever, ever talked about the abuse. It was, you know, it's so interesting, because people will say, I can't believe you guys didn't talk about it. You didn't talk about the abuse. You didn't talk about what was going on. Well, it's almost like, did you talk about how many times you had Captain Crunch for breakfast when you were growing up? I mean, you just did it. It just happened. And again, if you're a child who doesn't know anything different the entire time that you're growing up, what's to talk about? But also there was something very, very serious that went on in my home. There were threats. There were threats that if you go to school on Monday and you talk about this, my dad would threaten one of my sisters or my brother or something. So, there's that conditioning, that conditioning that goes on. And conditioning is very real. I mean, I don't need to get into that. I'll just make that statement. Conditioning is very real, and it's all around us. And so that was my conditioning.
Were all five of your siblings and abused?
My sisters, all of my sisters were. I can say that for a certainty. My brother too. Yes, my brother as well. So yes. There were no favorites. We were all treated equally in the realm of abuse, and it was both my mother and my father. So, and when I tell my story, people think that we were like poor, poverty-stricken, and living in a shack. No, my parents were wealthy, and quite powerful in the community. And so, again, who am I going to tell? Who am I going to go to, and who am I going to tell? And because nobody would believe me, and even if they did, they're not going to cross my family. I mean, no way. So that was the environment. That was the environment that I grew up in. And even though I didn't consciously know that what was happening was horrible, I did know how I felt, because at a very, very young age, I was given the brilliant gift of dissociation. So I would dissociate and go to different places during the abuse. But I also knew how I was feeling. Like when I would go to school, that emptiness, that empty feeling, or that gosh, so-and-so looks like they're happy, or wow, okay, different things like that. But I couldn't let them in, and probably because of my child's brain and my conditioning and all of that, I just couldn't let them in. And so when I discovered alcohol and drugs, it was nirvana. I mean, that was it. I didn't have to think about anything. I didn't have to live my life. I could be somebody else. The problem with that, and I started off as an extremely heavy drinker and drug user right from the get-go. There wasn't like a build-up to it. And I had that feeling and that ability to escape, and I hugged it for all it was worth. But it got me into a lot of trouble. I got into a lot of trouble with the law, with my friends, with my siblings, and also with my parents. The crazy making thing was that they were the reason I was trying to escape from my life. However, I was causing them such difficulty with all the trouble that I was getting into and everything that was happening. And so again, we want to talk about those solidified underlying negative and limiting beliefs. I mean, that's in there throughout my entire childhood. And also the it's my fault mindset as well. And so it all started for me at a very, very young age in solid conditioning, very much so. But I got arrested when I was 17. And I had the choice of, I don't know what my choice was, but I chose rehab. And so I went to rehab for 30 days. And I was away from home. and I was away from that community, and people actually saw me. And I remember one time my counselor saying to me, we had, you had one-on-ones every week with the counselor. I remember my counselor saying to me, he used to call me Debbie, Debbie, what happened to you? I mean, he asked me that question. And then, I'm crying and I'm not talking because I can't. I'm so conditioned that one of my siblings is going to get killed or hurt or whatever if I open my mouth. And then he put his chair a little bit closer to me and he said, Debbie, what did your dad do to you? So it was like he knew. He knew. And I couldn't speak. I absolutely couldn't speak. It was that conditioned and that solid within me. But what happened to me was that for the first time in my life, I felt like I could do something right. And that was staying sober, staying clean and sober, could do something right. And so 6 months after I got out of rehab, I went away to college. And I got involved in the recovery community in this college town. And that's when I first started to develop that spirituality that we talked about earlier, that spiritual connected, started to develop that. And also for the first time in my life, I had people who cared about me just because of who I was, not because of who my parents were, and not because of the power, but because of who I was. So things were starting to shift. Things were starting to shift a little bit for me. And I was starting to feel a little bit more power. Still not talking about anything that happened to me. It's still way, way back there. But it's kind of opening up a little bit as time goes on. But so life is getting better for me. I was in a bad relationship for a couple of years. I broke up with that guy and decided I wasn't going to go and live at home for the summer. So I moved down and lived in another college town and started my own little house cleaning business, because I love to clean. Because, sexual assault survivor, nothing can be clean enough. At least that was my perspective of it. So I was a great cleaner. And one of my clients sexually assaulted me. And I remember thinking several things. First of all, you want to talk about feeling forsaken by this new spiritual connection and this God of my understanding. I was like, are you kidding me? I am sober. I'm trying to live my life differently. And now this. It was devastating, absolutely devastating. I told no one. I didn't call the police. I was living with one of my sisters at the time. I did not tell her. I told no one. And I believe that's a big part of my conditioning. You don't tell anyone because it's your fault that this happened. And I could get into why I thought it was my fault, but it's nothing different than what anybody else has ever talked about. What I was wearing, how I was acting. I mean, I just went and picked up the fucking keys, right? But it's that self-blame piece that keeps going around and around. And so when that happened, it was devastating. And even talking about it now, you guys, I get a little bit of a racing heart. Even talking about that assault. And I think the reason is because before I went and picked up the keys from this guy, I was being talked to. You know how we talk about the spiritual connection and the calm voice that always wants to take care of us, which is always there. And then there's the other one. It's not really devil and angel on your shoulder. It's much more complex than that. But when I walked into his place of business to get the keys, this overwhelming feeling was inside of me. Turn around, go. And I didn't. I pushed it away. push it away. And I'm very careful when I say this because I don't want people to think that I'm still blaming myself for that. I wasn't capable at that time in my life to let that voice come forward and to really believe it. I absolutely wasn't. But that incident sealed it for me years later, that we are talked to all the time and told when it's safe and when it's not. That's why I tell that story, is because that's what sealed it, but it took many years later. So after the assault, I packed up my bags. I moved back home to Crazy Town. I got back together with that guy. I started smoking cigarettes, of course, after I quit drinking and doing drugs. And I just sat outside and I smoked for the rest of the summer because I'd kind of given up. But I never told anybody about why. And then when I went back to college with the same group of people, things started to loosen a little bit. Things started to loosen, and I never talked about it. I never let it come up into my consciousness, but something was loosening. And I'll just give the picture of something loosening around my heart, because I felt like most of my life, my heart was so protected, and for good reason, right? But it's so protected, but it just kind of felt like things were loosening a little bit because of this community that I was involved in, because of this spirituality that I was finding. And so that just kept going. That just kept going, but I still kept going home. I still kept going home. And it's not like the abuse stopped. I just kept going home because it's what I knew. And that's the crazy ass conditioning, that no matter how old you are, when you start at a very young age with that conditioning, until it is deliberately stopped, it continues on. And that, a lot of people can't make sense of that. And I understand that. But that's the way. Were you going to ask a question, Lorward?
No, I was just going to say, I heard something once that the reason family can get under your skin so well and knows how to push your buttons is because usually they're the ones that put them there.
Yes, that is exactly it. That is exactly it. Thank you for that. When I graduated from college, I moved to the cities, and that's where I met my husband.
Mm-hmm.
I broke up with that loser. I started to get healthy enough, but it took me about 3 or 4 years. But I broke up with him, and then I met my husband. I'd never met anybody like him before. He was very normal, very normal. And 9 months after we started dating, I had my first memories. That's when the little door started to open, and I started to get little chips of what actually happened to me. My body knew, my behavior knew, but I didn't have that conscious memory. But I had put myself in a position where I was safe with the people that I was in relationships with at that time. I had a spiritual foundation in my life that I didn't really quite trust yet, but I had it, and I was away from home. And so I started to have the memories. And the thing about it is that I never doubted them. And I know a lot of people struggle with doubting their memories. I feel very grateful that I never did. But part of it is that when I think about my memories, I think, I cannot make this stuff up. You can't, I don't have the capacity to make this stuff up. And most people don't. So I would encourage anybody out there who's struggling with, is this a real memory? Is this not? You go with this is your real memory, because we can't make this stuff up. And also trust how your body feels with it. And so that started my journey. That started my journey right there. But I couldn't start it until I was safe. And I think, we talked earlier about maybe some people never get what we would consider very far on their journey and stuff. Well, it's all about the safety that's around you, the real safety. I mean, I had real safety in my husband. I had real safety in these friend relationships. And my sister, My sister, who's a year younger than me, started having her memories at the exact same time I did. And our other three siblings still to this day deny that anything happened. And so I left my family in 1987, except for my sister. I haven't talked to any of them in over, what is that, 40 years? Not quite 40, 35 years. It doesn't work. I want to get drunk. And I start to feel really horrible about myself. And it doesn't work. I got one life. And it's about showing up the best that I possibly can show up. And I can't do that if I'm surrounded by people who are treating me less than, who are denying the reality. And so, yeah, I left them. And that was one of the hardest things I ever did, along with breaking the conditioning.
Well, I just really want to thank you for sharing that story. And I just want to read a little bit at the end of your story in the book.
Yeah.
Because I think this is such a great ending, but a beginning at the same time. Today, I can stay alone in my house. I feel safe. Today, I recognize and feel the anxiety of a trauma trigger and know how to manage it. Today, my relationships heal rather than harm. Today, I trust myself and my God within. Today, I share my story. The cycle stops now. So incredible. What's next for you in this journey, in your journey, your mission to help survivors?
Getting the book out there. Getting the book out there in the best way that I can. I mean, doing this podcast. Thank you so much for inviting me on your podcast. Contacting. I'm donating the first 500 copies of it to sexual assault survivor centers, to prisons, different things like that. And it's just getting it out there. And I'm just going to let my divinity kind of guide me on this. It might sound a little like, ooh, what's she talking about? But
We'll find out.
I'm going to be guided by that, just like I was guided to write the book. Just like I was guided to write that whole book. I did not want to write a book about sexual assault surviving. I did not. There were many other topics that I thought were a little bit more attractive to me than that, but it wouldn't go away. Would not go away.
Well, Deborah, we're very excited for you to distribute your book. I encourage everyone to pick up a copy, to read it, and we just thank you again for joining our program today, for sharing your story, all of your insights, and I'm sure our listeners also were able to get a lot out of this, and you were just incredibly helpful and just a great person to talk to, and we appreciate you so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yes. I mean, I can't recommend this more highly. Out of the Basement. It's a universal book for survivors, and it really can help you with your next stage in healing from sexual assault. Even if you've already felt you're dealing with it, pick up this book. It'll help you move further.
Absolutely.
Thank you, both of you. That's wonderful. I appreciate that.
And for everyone who's listening, please go to our YouTube channels, as well as all major podcast sites for this program, as well as other programs from Voices Beyond Assault.
And please send us your comments or leave your comments on this site. We really do value your input. There will be other information at the end of this program on how to contact Deborah, pick up her book, and go to her website. So look for that as well.
Yes. And thanks again to all of you survivors out there who are continuing your support of our programs and organizations such as Voices Beyond Assault. It's your courage that gives us all strength.
Hands on my chin, I was lost and looking in the glass of time. Was it just the wine made me cry? I hope I'm satisfied. I saw myself, an older man, folding up his paper plans and hiding it in his hands. Made me say, am I okay? Don't say too late tomorrow, too late tomorrow. My face crashed down as I had a look around amongst the crowd that wasn't really there, and I